Professor Klicktar adjusted his teaching robes for the third time in 10 minutes, which was either a nervous habit or a deliberate attempt to look more dignified. Given that he was a 7-foot-tall insectoid with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked when he was anxious, the dignity ship had probably already sailed. "Attention, students," he announced, his translator rendering his chittering into perfectly crisp galactic standard. "Today we embark on what I can only describe as the xenobiology field trip of a lifetime. We are aboard the research vessel Academic Endeavor, heading to observe the most feared apex predator in known space." The mixed group of alien students rustled with a combination of excitement and terror. Gleep, a gelatinous purple Blorbanian, immediately began that nervous wobbling thing his species did when stressed. His semi-sacrum body jiggled like sentient jello having an anxiety attack. "Professor," Gleep burbled through his speech membrane, "when you say feared apex predator, you don't mean we're actually going to be in the same room as it, right? Right?" Vex, a crystalline Zentaurian whose species had evolved from living gemstones, somehow managed to look smug, despite having no actual facial features. His body pulsed with confident blue light. "Oh, please, Gleep. We're the dominant species of the galaxy. How dangerous could one little creature be?" The third member of their study group, Prism, was a delicate crystalline entity who looked like someone had taught a chandelier to walk upright. She chimed softly as she consulted her datapad. "According to my research, the Shadow Maw has been responsible for the complete evacuation of 3 solar systems. It feeds on fear itself, and has tentacles that can crush a starship hull." "Exactly," Professor Klicktar's mandibles clicked approvingly. "The Shadow Maw represents the absolute pinnacle of predatory evolution. It possesses psychic abilities, incredible physical strength, and an appetite that has made it the stuff of nightmares across the galaxy." Leap's wobbling intensified to the point where he looked like he might splash onto the floor. "And we're going to observe this thing, why exactly?" "Because," the professor said with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested he either had tenure or a death wish, "understanding apex predators is crucial to understanding the balance of galactic ecosystems. The Shadow Maw sits at the very top of the food chain. Nothing hunts it, nothing threatens it. It is, quite literally, the ultimate expression of evolutionary perfection." Vex's glow shifted to a more confident gold. "Well, when you put it that way, I suppose it could be educational. After all, we Zentaurians have faced down plasma storms. How intimidating could one oversized tentacle monster really be?" The ship's intercom crackled to life. "Attention passengers, we are now approaching Research Station Omega-7. Please prepare for docking procedures." Professor Klicktar's compound eyes seemed to gleam with anticipation. "Excellent. Students, prepare yourselves for an encounter with the galaxy's most perfect killing machine. Today, you will witness evolution's masterpiece in action." What none of them knew was that they were about to learn a very important lesson about assumptions, food chains, and why you should never, ever underestimate a species that thinks Australian wildlife makes for good pets. Research Station Omega-7 looked exactly like what you'd expect from a facility designed to contain the galaxy's most dangerous predator. Imposing, heavily fortified, and sporting enough warning signs to make a supernova look like a gentle suggestion. The docking bay was sterile and cold, with blast doors that could probably withstand a direct hit from a battle cruiser. Professor Klicktar led his increasingly nervous students through a series of security checkpoints that would have made a maximum security prison look casual. "Welcome to Omega-7, came a cheerful voice from behind them. "You must be the university group." The students turned to see what had to be the most underwhelming sight in the galaxy. A medium-hit bipedal creature with pale skin, messy brown hair, and wearing what appeared to be a standard-issue lab coat. The being looked like it had evolved specifically for sitting behind a desk and drinking caffeinated beverages. "I'm Dr. Marcus Quill, head researcher," the creature said, extending one of its 5-fingered appendages. "Thanks for coming all this way. Not many folks want to visit our star resident." Professor Klicktar's mandibles clicked uncertainly. "Dr. Quill, I presume you're from one of the newer species to join the Galactic Federation. I'm not familiar with your evolutionary background." "Oh, I'm human," Quill said with a casual shrug. "From Earth. 3rd rock from a yellow star, you know how it is." Vex pulsed with dismissive amber light. "Human? I've never heard of your species. You must be from one of those peaceful garden worlds." Quill's expression did something that might have been a smile, but it was hard to tell with these soft-featured creatures. "Something like that. Anyway, ready to meet our friend?" They followed the unremarkable human through a series of corridors lined with containment protocols that grew more ominous with each step. Warning signs in 17 languages all basically said the same thing. This way lies madness and tentacles. Finally, they reached a massive reinforced viewport overlooking what could only be described as evolution's attempt at creating the perfect nightmare. The shadow maw filled most of the enormous containment chamber, a writhing mass of midnight black tentacles surrounding a central body that seemed to absorb light itself. Its multiple eyes, each the size of a shuttle pod, glowed with malevolent intelligence. Gleep immediately began making small whimpering sounds and tried to hide behind Prism, who was chiming in what sounded like crystalline terror. Even Vex's confident glow dimmed to a sickly yellow-green. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Dr. Quill said, sounding about as excited as someone discussing the weather. 30 meters from tentacle tip to tentacle tip, psychic abilities that can induce fear-based paralysis from 3 kilometers away and strong enough to crush a battle cruiser like a tin can. As if on cue, the shadow maw noticed their presence. Its massive form shifted, tentacles writhing, and suddenly the air itself seemed to vibrate with predatory menace. The creature's psychic aura washed over the viewing chamber like a tide of pure terror. Professor Klicktar's compound eyes went wide. Gleep made a sound like a deflating balloon. Vex's crystalline form went completely transparent with fear. Even Prism's melodic chiming became discordant with panic. The shadow maw's tentacles lashed out, striking the reinforced walls of its containment with impacts that shook the entire station. Its roar was something that bypassed the ears entirely and went straight to the primal fear centers of the brain. "Yup," Dr. Quill said conversationally, completely unaffected by the display of cosmic horror before them. "She's having a good day." What happened next would have been hilarious if it weren't so fundamentally reality-making. The shadow maw, in the middle of its impressive display of terror and tentacles, suddenly froze. All 30 meters of apex predator went completely still, as if someone had hit a cosmic pause button. Then, slowly, the creature's massive eyes focused on Dr. Quill, and the galaxy's most feared predator did something that absolutely no one had prepared for in any textbook, research paper, or nightmare scenario planning session. It whimpered. Not the kind of whimper you'd expect from a creature that could crush starships. This was the whimper of a puppy that had just been caught chewing the furniture. The shadow maw's tentacles, which moments before had been lashing with enough force to dent reinforced walls, now curled up defensively around its central body. "What?" Gleep managed to burble through his terror. "What is it doing?" The shadow maw was trying to make itself smaller. 30 meters of cosmic horror was attempting to compress itself into the corner of its containment chamber, all while keeping its multiple eyes fixed on the unremarkable human in the lab coat. Dr. Quill noticed the creature's behavior and sighed. "Oh, come on, Noodles. We've talked about this. You're being dramatic." "Did," Vex's voice cracked through his translator, "did you just call the apex predator of the galaxy Noodles?" "Well, her full designation is Subject N7793 Delta Leviathan, but Noodles is easier to remember," Quill said, approaching the containment field controls. "And she's not really the apex predator. That's kind of a misconception." Professor Klicktar's mandibles were clicking so fast they sounded like a malfunctioning computer. "Dr. Quill, I think there's been some kind of error. The shadow maw is clearly displaying submission behavior, which is impossible. It's an apex predator. It doesn't have natural predators." "Technically correct," Quill said, his fingers dancing over the containment controls. "It doesn't have natural predators. The key word there being natural." The containment field shimmered and then disappeared entirely. Every alien in the room made sounds of pure terror. Gleep actually tried to liquefy himself to escape through a drain. Vex's crystalline form went so transparent he was basically invisible. Prism's chiming reached frequencies that probably violated several noise ordinances. The shadow maw, now free of its containment, did not surge forward in a tide of destruction and tentacles. Instead, it pressed itself even further into the corner, making soft mewling sounds that would have been adorable if they weren't coming from a creature that had depopulated 3 solar systems. Dr. Quill walked calmly into the chamber. No, Professor Klicktar chittered frantically. "Dr. Quill, you cannot simply walk into an uncontained apex predator's chamber. This violates every protocol of xenobiology, common sense, and basic survival instinct." "It's fine," Quill called back, his voice echoing slightly in the massive chamber. "Noodles wouldn't hurt a fly. Well, she would definitely hurt a fly. Flies are basically snacks to her. But she's not going to hurt me." The shadow maw, upon seeing the human approach, made a sound that could only be described as a whine. Its tentacles actually retracted further, And if you didn't know better, you'd swear the creature was trying to make itself look non-threatening. See? Quill said, reaching out to pat one of the massive tentacles. She's just misunderstood. The tentacle, which could have wrapped around a small moon, trembled under the human's touch, like a nervous pet. This is impossible, Prism chimed weakly. Every study, every analysis, every mathematical model shows that the Shadow Maw is the ultimate predator. Nothing in the galaxy should be able to dominate it. Oh, that's probably true, Quill said, still casually petting the cosmic horror. Nothing in the galaxy. But see, here's the thing about humans. He turned to face the group of stunned aliens, his expression perfectly pleasant. We're not really from the galaxy, are we? We're from Earth. And with those words, Professor Klicktar realized that perhaps his curriculum was about to need some very significant updates. Earth, Dr. Quill continued, still absently stroking the cowering Shadow Maw, is what we call a death world, though honestly we just call it home. Gleep managed to reform enough of his gelatinous mass to speak coherently. Death world, that sounds ominous. Oh, it is, Quill said with the kind of cheerful enthusiasm usually reserved for discussing weekend hobbies. See, most planets that develop life tend to be relatively stable. Nice weather, predictable seasons, maybe some gentle herbivores wandering around eating space grass. Earth decided to go a different route. He gestured toward a wall display that flickered to life, showing images of Earth's surface. Let me give you the highlight reel. Our weather actively tries to kill us. We have storms that can level cities, temperature swings that would crack most species like eggs, and something called winter that basically turns half the planet into a frozen wasteland for months at a time. The display showed hurricanes, tornadoes, blizzards, and desert heat that made the aliens' homeworlds look like luxury resorts. But that's just the start, Quill continued. Our planet is geologically active. The ground literally opens up and swallows things. We have mountains that explode and cover entire continents in ash. The very air we breathe is so reactive that it slowly rusts metal. Vex's crystalline form was starting to regain some color, though it was more of a sickly green than his usual confident blue. Surely the life forms on your world adapted to be peaceful, to survive such conditions. Quill laughed. It was not a reassuring sound. Oh, that's the best part. Everything on Earth is trying to kill everything else. Our plant life includes things that will dissolve your skin on contact, trees that explode when they get too hot, and flowers that smell like rotting meat to attract flies. The display shifted to show Venus flytraps, poison ivy, and something called a manchineal tree that apparently made everything within a 10-meter radius toxic. Our herbivores, Quill said, his tone getting more animated, include creatures that weigh 4 tons and will trample you flat if you look at them wrong. We have deer that will kick you to death with hooves sharp enough to cut steel, and don't get me started on the hippopotamus. What's a hippopotamus? Prism chimed nervously. Imagine a living tank that spends all day in the water, weighs 3 tons, runs faster than most ground vehicles, and has jaws that can bite a small spacecraft in half. Oh, and they're herbivores. The things that eat meat are worse. The display showed lions, tigers, bears, and something called a honey badger that apparently had no natural predators because it was too angry to die. But here's where it gets really interesting, Quill said, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing a particularly good joke. Humans looked at all of this and said, you know what? Let's make friends with the scary ones. Professor Klicktar's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. He was staring at the human with the kind of expression usually reserved for natural disasters. We domesticated wolves, Quill continued, apex predators that hunt in packs. We convinced them to live in our homes and sleep in our beds. We call them dogs, and we bred them to be even more loyal and protective. Some humans keep tigers as pets. Tigers, striped death machines that can leap 20 feet and have claws like vibroblades. The Shadow Maw made a small whimpering sound as if it was feeling sympathy for the tigers. We surf, Quill said, as if this word should mean something. We strap ourselves to floating boards and ride waves that could crush buildings, just for fun. We jump out of perfectly good aircraft with nothing but fabric to slow our fall. We climb mountains that are actively trying to freeze us to death, and we call it recreation. Gleep had given up trying to maintain his shape and was now just a puddle of confused purple gelatin. We invented something called horror movies, Quill continued relentlessly. We deliberately create entertainment designed to terrify us, then we pay money to experience it. We have entire industries built around scaring ourselves for pleasure. But surely, Vex managed to pulse weakly, surely you must have some kind of advanced technology to survive in such conditions. Oh, we do now, Quill said. But here's the thing. We survived for millions of years without it. We evolved on a world where literally everything was trying to kill us, including the weather, the geology, and every other living thing. We became persistent hunters. We don't run fast, we don't have claws or fangs, we don't have natural armor, but we never, ever stop. The display showed human endurance runners, marathon races, and something called an Iron Man triathlon that looked like deliberate torture. A human can track prey for days without stopping. We can survive in environments that would kill most species in minutes. We can eat things that are literally poisonous and call them delicacies. We have something called the Carolina Reaper pepper that we eat for fun, even though it registers as a chemical weapon on most civilized worlds. Dr. Quill paused to scratch behind what might have been the Shadow Maw's ear, if cosmic horrors had ears. The creature leaned into the touch like a cat. So when Noodles here encounters a human, her instincts are screaming that she's in the presence of something that survived on a world where her species would last maybe 20 minutes. Every predator instinct she has is telling her that anything crazy enough to evolve on Earth is probably not something she wants to mess with. And, he added with a grin that was probably meant to be reassuring but definitely wasn't, her instincts are absolutely correct. Now, Dr. Quill said, reaching into his lab coat pocket, who wants to see something really interesting? Every alien in the room made sounds that roughly translated to absolutely not, but Quill was already pulling out what appeared to be a small container of food pellets. Feeding time, he announced cheerfully. The Shadow Maw's reaction was immediate and frankly embarrassing for a creature of its reputation. All 30 meters of cosmic horror began making excited chittering sounds, and its tentacles actually wiggled in what could only be described as anticipation. It was like watching a puppy realize its owner was holding a treat. Good girl, Noodles, Quill said, tossing a handful of pellets toward the creature. You've been very well behaved for our guests. The galaxy's most feared predator, the terror of 3 solar systems, the creature that had made entire civilizations pack up and move to different star clusters, carefully caught each pellet with delicate tentacle movements and made happy humming sounds while eating. This is wrong, Professor Clickar chittered weakly. This is fundamentally wrong on every level of xenobiology, psychology, and basic universal order. Well, this is nothing, Quill said, pulling out what appeared to be a small device. Watch this. He pressed a button, and suddenly the chamber filled with a sound that no amount of scientific education could have prepared the aliens for. The Shadow Maw was purring. Not the kind of purr you'd expect from a creature that feeds on fear and despair, but the deep, rumbling, contented purr of something that was genuinely happy. Bleep had completely liquefied at this point, and was slowly oozing toward the door. Professor, I think I need to change my major to something safer, like neutron star maintenance or black hole diving. You see, Quill continued, seemingly oblivious to the existential crisis he was causing, humans have this weird tendency to pack bond with dangerous creatures. We can't help ourselves. Show us something that could kill us, and our first instinct is to see if we can make friends with it. He pulled out a small tablet and began scrolling through images. Here's my colleague Dr. Peterson swimming with great white sharks. Here's Dr. Martinez bottle feeding a rescued baby bear. And this is Dr. Kim teaching a rescued wolverine to play fetch. The images showed humans in casual, friendly interactions with creatures that would have sent most galactic civilizations running for the nearest emergency evacuation pods. But the really interesting part, Quill said, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing a particularly fascinating scientific discovery, is that it works both ways. See, most species look at a predator and think threat. Humans look at a predator and think friend. I haven't made yet. He gestured toward the Shadow Maw, who was now rolling over to expose what might have been its belly, making the kind of content sounds usually associated with creatures that had never terrorized anyone. The thing is, predators are actually really good at reading social cues. They have to be, to survive. And when a human approaches a dangerous creature with genuine affection instead of fear, the creature picks up on that. It's confusing for them at first, but then they start to respond to it. Vex managed to pulse a faint yellow light. You're saying that humans have turned the galaxy's apex predator into a pet. Ooh, Noodles isn't a pet, Quill said, scratching what appeared to be a sweet spot behind one of the creature's eyes. The Shadow Maw's purring intensified. She's family. There's a difference. What difference? Prism chimed weakly. We love our pets, Quill said matter-of-factly. But we'd die for our family. And more importantly, we'd kill for our family. The casual way he said it made the statement infinitely more terrifying than any threat could have been. Let me show you something else, Quill said, pulling up another image on his tablet. This one showed a human child, probably no more than 10 years old, sitting next to what appeared to be a massive Earth predator with fangs and claws. "This is my daughter Emma with our family dog Rex. Rex is a German Shepherd mix, about 40 kilograms of muscle, teeth, and protective instincts. He's been trained to detect threats, disable attackers, and, if necessary, kill to protect the family." The image showed the child asleep against the massive canine, both looking perfectly peaceful. "Now here's the interesting part," Quill continued. "Rex knows that Emma is a puppy. Not literally, obviously, but in pack terms, and the one universal rule among Earth predators is that you protect the puppies. You protect them with your life, and you eliminate anything that threatens them." He looked up at the group of aliens, his expression still perfectly pleasant. "Humans have managed to convince the most dangerous predators on our world that we're all part of the same pack. And now that we're out here in the galaxy, meeting species like Noodles, we're doing the same thing." The Shadow Maw made a soft cooing sound and nuzzled against Quill's hand. "So when other species encounter a human, they're not just meeting one apex predator," Quill said, his voice taking on an almost conversational tone. "They're meeting the pack leader of potentially dozens of apex predators, all of whom have been convinced that the human is family." He paused to give the Shadow Maw another scratch. "And as we've established, Earth predators get very protective of their family." Professor Klicktar's compound eyes had gone completely glassy. "Dr. Quill, are you telling us that humans have weaponized the concept of adoption?" "We prefer to think of it as expanding our definition of family," Quill said. "But, yeah, basically." The journey back to the academic endeavor was conducted in what could only be described as traumatized silence. Professor Klicktar's mandibles hadn't clicked once since they'd left the research station. Gleep had managed to reform into a roughly humanoid shape, but kept randomly liquefying at the edges when he thought too hard about what they'd witnessed. Vex's crystalline form had settled into a dim, defeated gray that suggested his entire worldview had been shattered and hastily rebuilt out of inferior materials. Prism was the first to break the silence, her melodic chimes now sounding like a funeral dirge. "Professor, I think I need to completely revise my doctoral thesis. It was about apex predator behavioral patterns, but apparently I've been studying the wrong species entirely." Yes," Professor Klicktar said slowly, as if each word was being carefully examined for potential reality-making implications before being allowed out of his mouth. "I believe we all need to make some significant academic adjustments." The professor pulled out his datapad and began making notes with the kind of frantic energy usually reserved for emergency evacuation procedures. Lesson 1. Humans are not a peaceful garden world species. Lesson 2. Humans are persistence predators who survived on a death world by befriending other death world predators. Lesson 3. Humans have turned pack bonding into a form of galactic conquest. "Don't forget Lesson 4, Gleep burbled miserably. "Everything we thought we knew about apex predators is wrong, because we hadn't met humans yet." "And Lesson 5, Vex added, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose confidence had been systematically dismantled. "The real apex predators in the galaxy are the species that other apex predators voluntarily serve as emotional support animals." Professor Klicktar's typing was becoming increasingly frantic. "I'm going to have to completely restructure the xenobiology curriculum. We'll need new courses: human studies, advanced apex predator behavior, death world survival mechanisms, pack bonding as interspecies diplomacy, and why everything you thought you knew about evolution is wrong, a comprehensive study." "Professor," Prism chimed weakly, "do you think other universities will accept these findings? This seems like the kind of discovery that breaks entire academic departments." "They'll accept it," the professor said with the grim certainty of someone who just watched the galaxy's most feared predator act like a house pet. "Because if they don't, they'll keep teaching students that the Shadow Maw is the ultimate apex predator, and then those students will encounter humans and have the same existential crisis we just experienced." The ship's intercom crackled to life, interrupting their academic trauma processing. "Attention passengers, we are receiving an incoming transmission from Research Station Omega-7. Dr. Quill's cheerful voice filled the cabin. "Hey there. Thanks again for visiting. I hope you found the demonstration educational. Oh, and don't worry about the psychological adjustment period. Most species go through a phase of questioning their place in the universal food chain after meeting humans. It's perfectly normal." The transmission paused, and they could hear what sounded like the Shadow Maw purring in the background. "Also," Quill continued, "I should probably mention that Earth isn't actually considered a particularly dangerous world by human standards. We've surveyed about 24 other death worlds that make Earth look like a vacation resort. Most of them have human colonies now. We're thinking of opening some up for interspecies tourism, once we figure out how to keep the local wildlife from adopting all the visitors. Another pause, during which the purring grew louder. Oh, and one more thing, Quill said, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing an amusing afterthought. Humans generally consider ourselves the weak species in the galaxy. We don't have natural armor, we can't fly, we don't have psychic abilities, and we're actually pretty fragile compared to most other life forms. So, we've been working extra hard to make friends with everyone we meet, because we figure we need all the help we can get. The transmission cut out, leaving the cabin in absolute silence. After a long moment, Gleep spoke up in a voice that sounded like he was on the verge of a complete nervous breakdown. Professor, I've decided to change my major to something safer. What did you have in mind? Professor Klicktar asked absently, still frantically updating his lesson plans. Neutron star maintenance, Gleep said firmly. At least neutron stars are predictable. They just kill you with radiation and gravity. They don't adopt you and then introduce you to their extended family of cosmic horrors. I'm switching to black hole diving, Vex announced, his crystalline form flickering with resigned despair. Event horizons are nice and straightforward. Time dilation, spaghettification, complete annihilation. None of this psychological warfare disguised as friendship. I'm going into theoretical mathematics, Prism chimed mournfully. Numbers can't decide they love you and then casually mention they have friends who could end your civilization. Professor Klicktar looked up from his frantic note-taking. You know what? I think I'll join you. At least with abstract mathematics, the most dangerous thing you encounter is a paradox, and paradoxes don't purr when you pet them. As the academic endeavor continued its journey back toward civilized space, its passengers sat in contemplative silence, each processing the revelation that the galaxy's true apex predators were a species that thought they were the underdogs and had spent their entire evolutionary history making friends with things that could kill them. Behind them, on Research Station Omega-7, Dr. Quill was reading bedtime stories to a creature that had once terrorized 3 solar systems, while planning his next research proposal. Interspecies Friendship Protocols, a comprehensive study of why universal peace might be achievable through strategic hugging. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor, and apparently it was a human sense of humor, which meant it was equal parts terrifying and adorable, with a tendency to adopt dangerous things and call them family. In the end, that might actually be the most human thing of all.